Hi, everybody. It's good to see everyone arriving. While you're getting settled, here's a message from Glass Tire, a sponsor of this program. I'll go ahead and run that. Okay. All right. Thank you to Glass Tire. We appreciate them. They are our kind sponsors. And thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. I'm Terry Thornton, Curator of Education at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth, and happy to welcome you to Being There, Tuesday Evenings with the Modern, the museum's online alternative to our long-running lecture series, Tuesday Evenings at the Modern. Tonight, we have a special program in conjunction with Focus Wael Shawky, as the Modern's own Allison Hurst, who curated the exhibition, is in conversation with the artist himself about the work in the exhibition and beyond. I have been watching the exhibition take shape over the ropes in Gallery 6 with great anticipation and look forward to it opening this coming weekend. And tonight's presentation, I think, is going to be a great primer, after which there will be a Q&A generated by all of you. So feel free to write questions using the tab below throughout. And in the end, Wael and Allison will attend to as many as time allows. Wael Shawky lives and works in both Philadelphia and Alexandria, Egypt, where he was born and raised. Wael's art practice is ambitious and unique, which has come with an impressive international exhibition record, including at MoMA PS1 in New York, Serpentine Galleries in London, KW Contemporary Art Institute in Berlin, and the Walker Art Museum, or the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. He has been included in what seems to be every significant biennial exhibition across the globe, including the 50th Venice Biennale, as well as Documenta 13. This, of course, has come with critical recognition and awards such as the inaugural Mario Mertz Prize in 2015, all of which is undeniably notable. But what I might be most curious about personally is the span of Wael's practice, including his founding of MASS, an educational space in Alexandria in 2010, and also his notion of, quote, using history as material. I find that very interesting. So as you can see, there's a good deal to cover tonight. So I will turn it over to Allison and Wael. And thank you both so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Wael, for your participation in the exhibition and for agreeing to do this conversation this evening. Just to give everyone kind of an overview, so Wael and I have been installing the exhibition this week over FaceTime in true 2021 style. The exhibition opens on Friday, and it contains a film called Path to Cairo, which is part of Wael's ambitious and evocative trilogy, Cabaret Crusades, Wael's also created 28 new and related drawings to the film, and there will also be a sculpture. We're going to be showing slides throughout our conversation this evening, including stills from all three films from the trilogy, as well as some sneak peeks into the new drawings. But to just kind of give some context, I'd like to start with your beginning, Wael. You started out as an installation artist, which I feel like some people might find a little bit surprising, but I think after looking at the sets that you build for the films, it's to me quite apparent to see that connection. Can you tell us a bit about your beginnings as an artist?
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you so much for this beautiful invitation. I'm very happy to take part of it. And I'm really interested about the way we are installing this exhibition for sure online this time. I think it's fantastic. It's, as we said, it's really something historical for me that I do it this way. And okay, so the beginning, I think my beginning is, I would say I'm a painter originally. And from painting, I moved to installation. And then after that, I started to make films. So if I try to see my films today, I usually find that it's really including my background as a painter, and also a lot of sculptural elements in it. So it's really connected to my history of education as well.
And what about installation art? I know that you started out doing, there was a project involving asphalt and just some more kind of sculptural elements. Could you talk a little bit about that and maybe how that led you into being a filmmaker as well?
Okay, well, in fact, I'm always trying not to make, I don't try to concentrate on one medium. I always try to use several mediums, because I personally believe that each medium has its own limitations. So I believe in, when I was working in with asphalt, that was the beginning of this was in 2001 in an installation called CD El Asphalt Smoolet. And it was a metaphor for oil, and that was a translation for a specific political period we lived in Egypt, mainly during the time of Sadat, that was assassinated in 1981. So it's very important for me to try to connect between this period, Sadat, and also the oil discovery in the Gulf area, because most of the families, including my family actually in Egypt, decided to travel to Saudi Arabia because of the economy that came from the oil. So it was depending on the oil economy, basically. So that's when I started to use asphalt a lot of in my work. But in general, because of my childhood, because I lived big part of my childhood in Mecca, in Saudi Arabia, and of course Mecca is the heart of the Islam, for sure. So that affected a lot my work, and I still see this religious aspect in many of my films or even my drawings, and also because of this childhood that I was always traveling between Saudi and Egypt, I was always fascinated by capturing societies in transitions, societies that have this dream of development. And that was the time when I also lived in Saudi Arabia in the 70s. That was the society in Saudi that it's we can say it's more like a tribal society, but at the same time, because of the dream of modernity, they started to become more Americanized. And this mix between this new American capitalism and the tribal, originally Bedouin society, this mix made me feel like this is, I still see it. I mean, I still see this translation in my work until now. It's this idea of society that is trying to improve or develop. And sometimes it's just a dream, because they develop from one system to another system, from nomadism to urbanism, for example, or from agricultural society into urbanism, and so on. This is, and I still believe that this interest still exists today when I'm using any type of mediums, whether it's sculpture or films, anything. It's just, it's how to try to capture this moment of the dream of development.
And in that moment, that dream for development, is that what initially attracted you to the history of the Crusades? Because in some ways, I feel like that time period kind of echoes what you're saying about living between Mecca and Alexandria as well, and just these crusaders, I guess, dream of developing the land, of taking over, colonizing. Is that what, as a person growing up between Mecca and Alexandria, what did you know about the Crusades, and what drew you to this specific period?
Well, I mean, honestly, when I started this project, I didn't know that much about the history of the Crusades. But I studied during the making of the project. The project now, it's been 10 years, and it took me 5 years to finalize the 5 films. And it was a lot of reading, to reach this moment of satisfaction with what I am presenting in the script, basically. So, I mean, if you ask anyone today, even in the Arab world, about the Crusade is even if they don't know the details of the history of the Crusades, but it's always connected with the idea of the West, that is really can be America or can be Europe, is interested in the wealth that exists in the Middle East. This is like really the basic cliche idea. And whenever any type of war, for example, even if the Gulf War happened, it's always connected in the street that this is the new Crusades, for example. And I think it was very interesting for me to try to translate this history, but from the Arab point of view. And the beginning was, of course, the book by Amin Maalouf, Crusades Through Arab Eyes. That is really, for me, is more like how to construct the timeline for this trilogy. But I cannot depend on it to build the script, because it doesn't have these enough details. So I had to go back to the sources, the historical sources that was like Ibn al-Athir, Usama ibn Munqidh, Ibn al-Qalansi. All these names are Arab historians who lived during and right after the Crusades time. So from their writings, I decided to build the script and to make the film. And also something has to do with this idea of the dream of the development. I think it was like really, for me, it was intriguing just to read about the speech by Pope Urban II in Clermont, France. That was the launching for the first Crusades. And how was this speech, 1094, how it led into 200 years almost, of people who are like really moving from Europe. That means that this guy really had amazing charisma to convince people to move from Europe to Syria. I mean, back then it was not Syria, but it was to Damascus and Aleppo and Homs and to reach, in the end, to reach Jerusalem. And the idea also in the speech, if we really believe what's written in it, because it was not documented during the speech itself, but it was documented after. And that's also, for me, is telling how we believe in written history, that it's really something really critical to believe in it. But it's the main issue about this speech, that he is promising people if they don't get the land, they will get their seats in heaven. And for me, this is like another translation for, let's say, it's like Christian jihad, let's say. So it's like, for me, it's very interesting to try this, to take this point as is. Yeah, and I can just keep on, but just please continue.
Well, and you began the trilogy, the Cabaret Crusades, with the horror show file, and that has the speech of Pope Urban II. I mean, when you wrote the script, I mean, were you just like literally taking lines from those posthumous texts that you were finding? I mean, were you combining things and adding your own layer of subjectivities and myths to it? I mean, what was that process like?
I think I was trying not to add anything in the script. Really use what is written, even if I don't believe it, even if it's really like myth. But this is really what I like a lot, because in fact, I don't believe in written history that much. And I think this is a way to analyze our belief in it, is just to be very precise in present it as is exactly. I think I did exactly the same when I decided to use the Song of Roland in one of my performances. Because in the end, the Song of Roland one day was considered history, like written history. And when you see it today, it has a lot of myth, of course. It has a king who is speaking to angels, and that he can make the sun stop if he wants, and all of this, but it's one day was part of the history. I try to connect this also, this type of history that we write in the history of Karbala. I mean, this is another story, and it's very, very important for the Islamic history in general, because it's a split between the two main sects in Islam, Shia and Sunnah. And when I see today the reason for this split, it's we will never know what is it exactly, because it's also written the same way. I try to use it in the third part of Cabaret Crusades. I try to use the historical sources to construct this period, which is a battle that happened after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. And from this battle, this split happened between the two groups. So the idea is really how to try to use what we have from this historical references, and deal with it in my way is to deal with it in a sacred way, and not really to try to change. But I change everything individual. That's why you see animals talking, and you see landscape that it's moving, but not really anything in the script.
And also, I think what's so interesting too, and I think, you know, people that are watching tonight can see that each of the films have a very specific visual language. This is Path to Cairo, the film that we'll be showing at the Modern. A lot of times, in addition to the script, you're also using paintings and maps as the historical documents that they are, that are also, of course, subjective, and their meaning, depending on who painted that or who created the map. Can you talk a little bit about just the differences in the visual language of these films, and maybe specifically in Path to Cairo, what we're seeing with that one?
Sure. Well, the three films. The first film is made with historical Italian marionettes that are 200 years old marionettes, and that was really the beginning of the whole idea. And I decided to make it's the historical period for this is starting from the speech by Pope Urban II that we just talked about until the Crusaders, the first wave of the Crusaders arrived to Jerusalem. And that was in 1099. So it's talking only about 4 years of the history. And I decided just to make it, the visual was like really like Renaissance, and I think it's even more European, more than something coming from the area of Jerusalem or Syria. And then in the second part, I decided to make it a little bit more complex and longer. So it speaks about the period between 1099, when they arrived already to Jerusalem, until the death of very important Islamic hero. His name is Ahmad ad-Din Zenki. And I decided in this part to change the visual completely, that makes it connected to maps made by a Bosnian artist called Nasuh Matriksi. And in the film that you are showing now, you will see many of these maps of Nasuh Matriksi in the background of the marionettes. And of course, these maps, we changed it completely. We made them into 3D. If we are, for example, in Aleppo, you will see the map of Aleppo in the background, and so on. It was also very important for me to use certain material, which is ceramic, because I was producing this film in Oban, in France. It's very close to where the launching of the first crusade happened. And the technique that we used is the technique that it's connected to the church, the Christian, because they use something called santons, where they are small figurines that they put inside the church to tell the story of nativity, the trip to Egypt, and so on. So I tried to use the same masters that has this old tradition in making these European Christian santons, but to make marionettes that tells the history of the Crusades, but from the Arab point of view, and just try to shift the rules. And yeah, I think it was very interesting, because it has never been done this way, that these amazing artisans, they have never made marionettes before. Then when I moved to the third part, it was also very important for me to try to use material that is connected to the historical period that I'm speaking in. So I found that the last part is connected to the history of Venice, because the French leaders went to Venice for the fourth crusades, for the fourth wave. And without Venice, we wouldn't have the last the biggest, let's say, wave that went to Constantinople instead of going to Egypt. Anyway, I decided to make Venice is the center of the third part. So in that case, I found the idea to use Murano glass to construct all the marionettes for the third part. And that was also, that has many different reasons. One of them, of course, is the idea of fragility in these marionettes, and how can you feel that these people are very fragile. And at the same time, also to connect it to the history of Venice, as I said. So it's always like, it's always a research, a complete research to try to make the marionettes connected to the scenography, and at the same time also to make differences and to make it very significant to the historical period that we are using. For example, what we see now here is based on a map by Nasuh Matriksi, the Bosnian artist. This is the map of Baghdad. And you will see one of these, I mean, it's not exactly the same, of course, I changed it, but it's driven from his capturing to the city back then. So you will see this in the film, actually, in the second film.
Yeah, I noticed it today, actually, as we were installing. I thought, okay, that's exactly the same view as this new drawing, which I think is really amazing. Going back to, like, we're seeing some of these drawings, and I think the drawings really relate nicely to the marionettes. What's your process between the two? And I mean, how do you create sketches for the marionettes, and then are those somehow translated back to the drawings? Can you talk a little bit about those and the connections there?
Yeah, I think, I mean, usually when I see drawings, I usually feel that they can work as like as a storyboard for me. But of course, sometimes it's very difficult to achieve them. I see a lot in my drawings. Usually, it's very spontaneous. I honestly don't try to calculate it at all. And it just like that's, and I think this is usually the what I like about them. If they are, if I start to stop and think in during the drawing, it's dead, and I don't use it. So that's the idea. And this is exactly the opposite of making a film, because it's many layers, many people. You're dealing with a lot of filters, and to go through something, you have to really to go through a lot. So, for example, to make the marionettes, yes, I made a lot of sketches from them, but they're all based on drawings on previous drawings that I made a lot. And I think that will be even more visible in the third part, because I think the third part has something a little bit different, because it's the scenography is based on Giotto's painting. And when I see it, I find that it's really, especially the making of the marionettes is really, I see it a lot of my drawings, that it's, yeah, as I said, it's just subconsciously made. It's, yeah. Yeah, so the second part is, as you can see, most of the drawings that you see today in the exhibition has this animal face that you will see in the second part. While the third part, it's actually the faces are I was just inspired with when I visited the African African department in Metropolitan Museum. I mean, I started to think of how to turn the masks, the African masks, into glass, because of course there's always a way for me to try to escape how to make something realistic, and how things become also connected to what we know in advance. So for me, when we try to use something like Murano glass to make marionettes, Murano glass has its own history, and it can be easily kitsch. Very simple that it turns into kitsch. If you don't find the right, I believe, if you don't find the right element or point to shift it into something completely different. And in that case, nobody will even understand that this is driven from African mask, or this is, but I think sometimes I like to remove mediums from its own history. So in that case, we deal with it in a different way.
And what you just said too about kind of removing it from realities, is that part of the reason you don't use adult actors for any of your films? I mean, besides even the Cabaret Crusades, I mean, you use children in other film series. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, sure. I mean, honestly, I try to work with adults, but it's for me it's very difficult because I don't like acting at all. I in general, I don't like acting, and I don't believe it after a while. I mean, but no matter what, in the end, I know that this is acting. So when I work with kids, it's fantastic because they don't know what we're talking about at all. And in a film like Telematch Sadat, for example, and that was in 2007, it was a reenactment for the assassination of Sadat in that was 1981, and also the funeral of President Sadat. And the kids that were playing this film didn't know who is Sadat, actually. They never seen this assassination. They don't know what we're talking about. So they were just following what I'm saying. Jump from this car, take the gun, run this way. So there is no reactions or drama in the face or anything. They're just like really doing what we're saying. And I think in that case, you're concentrating more on the topic itself, not on the skills of the actor or the drama. And of course, that's developed after that when I started to work with marionettes, because this really made me feel much better, that I really only use the voices of performers. And yes, and in that case, you can also, as a human being, I think it's much easier for me to project myself into a marionette than projecting myself into an adult professional actor. I mean, in the end, I felt that I can believe it more. I can relate to it more. And I still can have many layers in it, which is like, as I said, it's sort of an analysis. You will never question the marionettes. The marionette is very difficult to see that the marionette is good or evil or bad, or it's never the same. At the same time, you deal with it without a gender. There is no gender in it. It's just society. So you're removing many skills of things that usually is like distracting us to read this history. So you just deal with the translation of the topic, or the translation of the historical text, let's say.
I also wanted to ask you too, because music and sound, I mean, it's hard to tell since we're just looking at stills in this presentation, but in these films, I mean, it's so important. It's such a huge part of these films. Can you talk about the role music plays in this trilogy as well?
Yes, the music also is very important for me. Okay, I make music. I'm not a musician, but I make the music, and I work with musicians also. And that's something very, very important for me, because in the end, I consider it also musical films. So starting from the second part, I worked with musicians from Bahrain that plays a very traditional type of music, that it's pearl fishing music. And this is a very traditional type of music. It's called Fijeri music. And I love it, really. it's very male music. It's, for me, it's like a war, and it's like it doesn't have instruments. The instruments there is their voices, their humming, their clapping, and drums, and that's it. But they create symphonies. In my opinion, it's really incredible. I mean, for me, the first time I heard it, I was maybe 17 years old or something, and I was like really impressed. And then I started to use it in different ways, including also my performance, the Song of Roland. And also it was important to use different type of music and different type of recitation, because it's for example, in the third part, I used some of they call them for Shia they call them raduds. And Radud is someone who is telling the history of the killing of the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. This killing is the reason of this split between Shia and Sunnah. So when you bring a Radud, especially if you bring a Radud from Iraq, they have an incredible sad voice that it's amazing. So I decided to bring a Radud to record some parts of the script. That is, of course, it's told by the marionettes in the film. And I also used some of the Sufi singers in Egypt in some parts, but it depends on which part exactly, which marionette is doing this. So it's usually I mix between really different things. Sometimes it's electronic music, sometimes it's very traditional folkloric music. Yeah, but I mean, I feel that I'm using all these different things again to try to escape the idea of having on concentrating on a style or concentrating on or any type of exoticism, for example, because still we are in Egypt, for example, in the film. So I don't like the idea that we are connecting being in Egypt to traditional Egyptian music, for example. I like to remove these known cliches about this area. So yeah, that's mainly what is happening with the music.
It's really interesting. And these, I mean, there's so many layers in these films. I mean, it's really incredible. I mean, what's your process? How long do you spend on a film? I mean, just what's your process for that?
I mean, Cabaret Crusades took in total about 5 years. 5 years to create. I mean, a lot. Like I think we created over 500 marionettes, maybe in total. 500 marionettes plus 3 films, plus of course many exhibitions, many drawings, many things. So it was a lot of work. I think it was really like constant work. For example, a film like another trilogy I'm showing is called Araba Al Madfuna. And in this trilogy, for example, the film maybe didn't take like more than 4 to 5 months to be produced completely. But it has something very interesting also. It has to do with the Al-Araba Al Madfuna, because Al-Araba Al Madfuna, I started in 2011.
Simultaneous with at the same time as this project.
Yes. The first Cabaret Crusades was 2010. The first Araba Al Madfuna was 2011. And I was really happy that I'm producing 2 trilogies at the same time. Within these 5 years, I finished both of them. and they are completely different from each other. And this is really something I like a lot, that they're not really exactly the same. So in Araba Al Madfuna, I was working with kids in the beginning, also because of the same reason. There is no acting, and it was black and white, and all of this. And I in the third part, I decided to turn the colors and the light to be inverted, so everything became inverted. And in that case, you even don't know if they are kids. You lose the innocence of being kids, and that's for me even much better, because in that case, if there is any type of a sense of romanticism in it, you also erase it. And I think that was a good step in the Araba Al Madfuna in the last part.
Interesting. Have you been revisiting that project as well? I mean, I think it's what's so interesting, I guess, is the second part of the question. I want to know if you're revisiting that project as well, but I think it's so interesting that you've created this new suite of 28 drawings related to this project, which, you know, the last film was made in 2015. Is this something that is typical for you? Is it the Cabaret Crusades in particular that drew you to just keep the project going? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that? It's so unusual,
yes,
but
yes,
I think
yes.
it's so fascinating.
I think for me, Cabaret Crusades is still happening, and I think it's me. Yeah, for me, it's still alive, because it's, as I said, I mean, even in the films that I have, it doesn't have clear beginning and end, because I feel it's like it's a lie anyway. So you're just taking part of the history. It doesn't have a beginning and end. It's just like, and also coming from this background, I mean, if you go to any biennial or any place, I mean, the audience usually just enter from the middle of the installation, and this is something I really like. I prefer this more than showing the film in a cinema. Because in the end, it's more real, honestly. Just like you're just capturing part from the history. You can even watch everything, but it doesn't have to be really from the beginning till the end to get something. You get everything whenever you enter. It's just like, this is the idea. And I think this happened also with the series The Cave, that it's, I mean, for me, I mean, I'm still looking for a supermarket in America to make another part of it. And I did this the first part, I did it in 2004 in Istanbul. So yes, I was like, really, when I was making the drawings for this exhibition, I was really, I'm still working on it. There's nothing has changed. It's still in my mind, and it's still, sort of, continuing the process.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the process is interesting with your drawings too, because I know at one point I asked if I could see a couple of them as they were in progress, but it sounds like your process for drawing is really to work on a large group together at the same time, and you're adding layers as well. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, also the drawings usually are not exactly the same from one exhibition to another exhibition. I always like to, in every exhibition, to include new drawings. And I always find that this is the alive element in the exhibition, because honestly, I mean, the Cabaret Crusades was shown in many different venues, and it's always important to have something. It doesn't have to be just new, but also connected with the time being, with me as someone today. So it has something always changing. So I believe it's. I'm very happy with this series of drawings for this exhibition. A lot.
I am too. They're absolutely gorgeous, and I hope everyone that's here today can come see them in person. Well, this seems like a great place to kind of shift over to see if we have any questions from the audience. Again, the show opens on Friday, and I hope everyone can see it. But Terry, do we have any questions from the audience? You're muted, Terry.
All right. Well, it doesn't matter how long you do this. You're still Zoom faux pas. My apologies. All of that, I was just talking away about how we have these great questions coming in, and I have my own list over here because that was just so good. I appreciated so much, Wael, your commitment to this. I mean, you can just feel it. I just love it. And I have to say, I appreciate you, Allison, just staying with Wael, and there just being this really kind of sincere exchange. I thought that was great. But I will get to the questions. First question is from someone who says, I had the opportunity of seeing your work installed in the Summer Palace at the Biennial in Lahore. Can you please talk about how the exhibition setting may change the effect of the work aesthetically for you as an artist and possibly also for the audience? For instance, the Lahore fort compared to the installation at MoMA PS1 or the Walker. Do you experience differences in feedback from audiences depending on where the work is exhibited and the cultural references the various audiences may share? That's a big question.
Yes.
It's a good one.
It's fantastic. I mean,
yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't have photos to show from Lahore, but it was really, for me, it's really, really special project.
Mm-hmm.
I had the chance to make it with curator Hur Al-Qasimi in Lahore, and it was incredible historical palace. I mean, I couldn't even dream that I would be showing the trilogy in this place. And they were very generous with me, honestly, to give me like incredible, huge space to show the 3 films. And then I decided to make a huge, big city out of asphalt. And I mean, honestly, the whole project came to my mind when I arrived Lahore, and is it different from the one I made in MoMA PS1? Absolutely, it's completely different. It's different in different exhibition even, and I think that's why I think it's very important. I mean, I think it's very important for me to be engaged in every single exhibition and just try not to send the work by itself and just to show it somewhere and that's it. It's important to invent something that is related to the history of the place that I'm showing at. Another example that also was extremely significant for me was when I was invited to show in Istanbul Biennial in can't remember, maybe 2017 or something, but I mean in the end, it was curated by Caroline Christoph, and she also gave me an amazing historical hammam in Istanbul, and we created something like, again, it depends on this place that you can turn the installation into something else. It's not, because in the end, I like to work with films, as I said, not in a cinema. I don't like the idea that someone is sitting in one position in the cinema watching the screen, because in that case, no matter what, it's 2D. But if you have the opportunity to deal with this projected image as an installation, when you are walking next to it, it's something completely different. It's another experience. It's alive, and I think that's why to project in this big huge screen inside the hammam, and you try to deal with the hammam as the installation, for me, it's fantastic. I mean, yeah, I mean, yes, I try to do something else in white cubes inside museums, which is to paint the walls of the museums in blue, or yeah, this color that we're using. So, but it's different experience. To work inside white cube is something completely different from trying to work with the actual historical building to build something else. Yeah. I don't know if this is answering anything, but this is.
Oh, you answered it many times, I think, and that was lovely. I will just insert again that I find your inspiration, you making visible your inspiration is inspiring. It just, I love that, and people will get to see that difference. That the installation crew and Allison and you have worked so hard on, of walking from the white cube, the traditional museum, through the museum into your space at the modern. And yes, that blue, what you're saying is it's a stand-in for you being in these locations that actually come with their own story that you can then respond to. And in this case, the color is kind of doing that for you. It's making that separation.
Yes, yes.
That's lovely.
Yes.
Okay, so here's another question. The marionettes start off looking like regular humans, but by the third film, they look very inhuman. What was your reasoning with this design evolution?
Yeah. Yeah, well, as I said, in the third film, I started to, okay, it's the idea for me is how to try to, not to make it extreme, but again, to try to keep the surreal look.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, how can you remove the material itself? As I said, the material with its history, like Murano glass. How can you remove it from being kitsch, from being something decorative? So to make this shift, I think it was very important for me to pass this idea of being realistic human. It's becoming more like what we see now. These things are really based on African masks, but you will never see that this African aspect in it. And that's important for me. This mix, that it's in the end, it's human language. It doesn't really connect to particular history of Africa or Murano glass. So it was intentional, honestly, to try to move it to a higher level. Like exactly the idea of turning the film in Araba Al Madfuna into inverted image. So you lose, you erase this innocence of the kids. They just become, society element of a society is speaking, and that's it.
So amazing. So on that notion of material, I'm going to throw in I was so enamored when I listened to you on the, I was, listening to you. I think it was for the Hugo Boss nominee speech. And you said that about using history as a material. So when you're talking about the Murano glass and you're talking about how you have to be sensitive to it and all that comes with it, and then make whatever changes so that it doesn't remain itself, but it honors itself. Or I mean, I may be putting words in your mouth there, but how does that work with history?
Yeah, because, okay, that's very difficult.
Yeah, maybe too.
Yes. I don't know if this also will answer or not, but okay. The first time when I visited Murano, I went to, because I produced this part of the marionettes, the glass marionettes in Murano in a foundation called Berengo Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when I arrived there, I found many artists who tried to make objects with Murano glass. And okay, I would be very honest in this. I'm just, and I said this before, so I just don't want to be, but I found many of artists that I really think that they are amazing artists, really amazing artists. The object itself is not as great as other objects they made with with other materials, and that's because the glass itself hold in itself this history that it's it's decorative sort of. So yeah, that was the idea. How can you shift it from this type, its own history? Clay, for example, to work with clay is different because, okay, in the end, clay has a religious reference.
Mm-hmm.
It's connected to us. I mean, in the Quran, for example, okay, we are made out of clay.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that we are coming from earth and all of this. So to build this from clay, it was not the same challenge. It's not the same challenge. I think it's very difficult to become kitsch for me. It's something else. It's difficult to be decorative. It's much easier to become an artwork. Okay, I don't know how to connect this to history. I mean, it's, it's many elements. It's just building music, building marionettes. And yeah, in the end, I'm trying to make it look like storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of questions. Of course, questions coming from the idea that I'm questioning history anyway. I'm questioning writing history. So so that's why also it's called cabaret, in my opinion, because it looks like a show.
Yep.
The presented history for us, the way it's presented, it's a show. It's as if we are the audience, and there are people writing this drama for us. That is how much it's real or fictional, or we really don't know. We're just receiving the timeline.
Okay, this is I think a simpler question. We're getting close to time, so somebody wants to know: has your time in Philadelphia had a big impact on your work?
Absolutely, yes. I had my master's in University of Pennsylvania, and I think that was 2000. That was the first time I used material like tarmac, asphalt, and that was really the first time I use it. And then also, I don't like to live in Cairo. I don't like to live in New York. I like always the city that it's really less packed and less, it has too much noise. I prefer this. Yes, and Philadelphia for me is really amazing place to think and to read. I mean, I think, for example, I produced my last exhibition in Listen Gallery in my studio here in Philadelphia, and it was a lot of production and a lot of thoughts, and I'm very happy with the energy that I'm having here. It's a very, very nice city. Yeah,
that's nice. So to be just off center, not in the center.
Yes.
A little bit like walking in the middle of in the midst of your films instead of at the beginning and going beginning to end. I think that's probably all we have time for. I think this is more of just a compliment, so I'll read it to close us out. It's Someone says, good evening to all. I'm really thankful for such an interesting and honest talk. Thanks for organizing it. I discovered Araba
Araba Al Madfuna.
Thank you. At the Palace de Tokyo last year in Paris and was completely blown away and touched. I would like to know if the actual continuous sanitary situation is influencing influencing your experience at work, if you are resisting it or even finding some resonance with past history, which is somehow nourishing your artwork, as I understood. Do you understand that question?
Not really, not that much. But okay, can you try to
let me see.
simplify?
Okay, it's the question is, I think when we get to the question is, this person obviously experienced your work in person and has been very impressed and moved by it. I would like to know if the actual continuous sanitary situation, so I think maybe COVID is the situation we're talking about here, is influencing your experience at work. If you are resisting it or even finding some resonance with past history, which is somehow nourishing your artwork, as I understood. So is this like the isolation and this, all the protocol, is that in any way, I apologize to ask this question if I'm misunderstanding it. That's what I'm.
Well, let's try. The situation, if it's really okay. Okay. I don't know if she means COVID. I mean, maybe she means something. Does she mean COVID really?
I don't know. You may have insight into that.
Okay.
The way it's worded is the sanitation situation.
What is affecting?
Yes,
okay, let's just say what is affecting my work in general. Okay. 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 I mean, Al-Araba Al Madfuna is something. Okay, is something very important to me because it tells part of my. It's a personal story. I lived it myself in one of the villages in Egypt. It was not very long. It was like only 2 weeks. And I was, during these 2 weeks, I was just, noticing people who are claiming that they can see underground and they can heal people. They have superstitious power anyway. If they really believe in this, and it was like really something that they heal you from spirits and so on, but they use this power anyway, mainly to try to discover treasures underground, pharaonic ancient Egyptian treasures like mummies and gold mainly in the ground. So they use they use different system. Let's say they use a metaphysical system. So for me, what is amazing that they are using a metaphysical system to reach materialistic physical system, which is gold or money or so on. So I lived this, and for me that was incredible. How can you connect between these two different worlds? Physical and metaphysical. How can, but we live it. We already live it. There is something that we don't see and something we see. It's based on our senses. Okay, it's religious, but it's also, we live it. It's reality that we know that there are things we don't see. Even if we are atheists, it doesn't matter, but it exists. And so for me, how can I translate this, my personal story? I worked with kids, and in the end, their voices is coming from adults. I made everything like shifting. They are telling a story, but at the same time, the visual, what you see in the film, is completely different story. it's like two different worlds happening in these films. And so these things are like what is affecting me, for example, in the beginning, when I started to work with a film like The Cave, I was invited to a residency in Istanbul, and it was a really long residency. I stayed there for about maybe 7 months. When Istanbul in 2004 was like really struggling to be part of the European Union. At the same time, many people are refusing this. So you see a lot of demonstrations in the streets and just like against the idea of being part of the European Union because they are, of course, are afraid of losing their identity or Islamic identity or something. And that was for me very important. Again, it was a translation also for this situation in Istanbul, and also it was a self-portrait because as someone came from this Islamic background, at the same time I am living within this capitalistic system. I found that this is exactly the situation in Istanbul. This conflict between this identity and modernity or capitalism. Back then, it was, of course, it was more like capitalism. So yes, I decided to recite from memory this whole surah from Quran. It's called The Cave inside the supermarket. And that was the film. It was, yeah, and for me, this is still important because it's, it presents also this time in the conflict in the Middle East, and also it reflects me. As I said, it's self-portrait. Yeah. So yeah. So these are the things that is really. Hopefully, this is answer. I don't know.
It was beautiful. I want to live in your head for a day. Wow. That was fantastic. Thank you so much to you and to Allison. You both did a beautiful job. And thank you to everybody who joined us tonight.
Thank you so much. That was lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a beautiful day.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.